morning, US, Canada, good afternoon in UK, Europe, Africa, and good evening in Asia, Pacific, in India, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and great late good evening in Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, I am really delighted this evening, though there are tough situations around, strange situations around, but at the same time, I am really delighted. I was looking for this evening for a long time to have someone very dynamic. I said very dynamic, very versatile, and a very brilliant journalist of our country with me on the show. This personality has really been seen as one of the very proactive, brave, and very strong journalists, a trendsetter, a go-getter, and ever-fighting spirit in journalism. Her name is Madam Aarti Tikoos. She is presently the Foreign and Strategic Affairs Editor at Indo-ASEAN News Services. I am really delighted and excited to welcome Aarti to this prime time leadership excellence series called New DNA of Leadership. Aarti ma'am, welcome to this show.
Thank you, Mr. Bakshi. It's a pleasure, it's an honor and a privilege to be talking to you today, and also getting connected to Indians and other citizens of the world at the crucial juncture in history, actually. It is also a very sad time that I'm doing this interview with you. I would have really preferred it to be in normal circumstances, and I would have really loved to have one-on-one with you. But given the circumstances, and in a way, I have to really say this, that this actually is not a good time to be focusing on one particular journalist like me. I really feel that we are at a very, very, very critical juncture in humankind, in mankind overall, because we are seeing people dying around us. We are seeing people gasping for breath. We are seeing people really torn apart by a virus which has completely swept the entire world. So I feel a bit embarrassed, really, to be doing this interview, because I feel that it's a narcissistic trait to be talking about yourself while the world around you is falling apart. But since I had committed myself to this interview, I'm doing it. I may hold back some of the things that I had planned to say, but I will try to answer as many questions as I get from the audience and you today. Thank you.
Aarti ma'am, I am in full agreement with you, and I respect you, what you are saying. Right now, we are in a catastrophic situation of life ever seen in human race. Even 2020 was not that bad, but this last couple of weeks has really destroyed peace of mind. And in fact, many of our known people, friends, relatives have already left us. I lost a couple of people in my close relations last 15 days, and some are still struggling in hospitals and other places, even at home. Families are into bad shape right now. You are absolutely right. But at the same time, I believe since we had committed about this, we need to keep this on. And at the same time, when we will be talking about some of the journey of excellence as a leader, and these are the challenges. And, we always say tough things do not last long, but tough people last long. I understand what pain you, me, and many others in the human race are going through, and it is pitiable. It's not right what's going on, and there are a lot of mistakes around. Of course, I will also not be in that frame of mind, but at the same time, being professional on this, I am not a journalist, but as a professional human resource person, I think I will have to carry on with this and have some discussion with you. Ladies and gentlemen, as Aarti ma'am rightly said, this is something very strange.
Mr. Bakshi, let me interrupt you here for a second. I would really appreciate if you call me Aarti, or you call me Tikoo, or you call me Aarti Tikoo Singh. I am way junior to you, and I really believe that people like you, we really actually look up to, because you have so much of experience and you've seen the world. And given the circumstances right now, I think there is all the more, I would say, respect and love and admiration for people who are older and senior to me.
Thank you, Aarti, for that. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be introducing Aarti. And in the meanwhile, please park your questions in your parking lot. I will take your questions as far as possible after I am through with my questions. Those who are on Zoom, I would certainly like them to really ask questions themselves. I will unmute those who are on Zoom. But those who are on other platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Global Talent Television, I will facilitate the process. Let me have privilege and honor of introducing Aarti. Aarti is known as the firebrand journalist with 3 A's: articulation, abundance, ardent, and 3 G's: guts, galore, and grace. And she was born in a place called Anantnag in Jammu and Kashmir. Anantnag. Nag is like a small river. Anant is, Anand. And after the Kashmiri Pandits were really thrown out of Kashmir by the radical Muslims in early 1990, she also went to Jammu, and she will share some of that, trauma she has gone through. She studied in the University of Jammu and also did Masters in International Affairs from New York's Columbia University, and started her career in New Delhi. She has huge following on Twitter. When you see, you can watch her there every minute with something new coming up from such a great journalist. She is indeed, I call her a leader of journalism. I call her a doctor of journalism. That's what I can say. As a reporter, she has worked in very conflict zones across India, such as Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Assam, J&K. And after working with various dailies in India, such as Hindustan Times as a senior assistant editor, Times of India, United Nations, BBC News, she is currently working as foreign security affairs editor at the agency called Indian Asian News Agency. Aarti has over 18 years of experience on journalism, focusing on international relations and conflicts. She reported from state of Jammu and Kashmir, a conflict-ridden state, for almost 7 years. Tough, and that to a Kashmiri Pandit, covering politics, violence, governance, and human stories. Aarti is represented in the United States congressional hearing on Kashmir, as well as many other congresses. She has been a writer, analyst, editor for 2 decades, covering wide range of issues. Her areas of focus are international relations, Indian politics, economic, and foreign policy. She has written extensively on conflict, war, and terror. When you look at Aarti, Aarti is a Times Aspire Award winner and WISCOM, Women in Security Conflict Management Peace Fellowship awardee, among many other awards. She has been author of Guns and Books at Odds, the impact of military on education in Jammu and Kashmir, publication of 2007. That is the real background of this great lady we have with us, Aarti, today. I would like to welcome you, and this is, Aarti, I want to tell you, this new DNA of leadership is something. I normally have a program, my signature program called DNA of Leadership. But when we were in a pandemic, and then we said, what do we do? And then we started new DNA of leadership. And in fact, today, one of my Lieutenant General, He said, you should talk about COVID warriors, DNA of leadership now. And that's a fact of life. You're also a COVID warrior. You're also fighting out daily. So let me have my first question, Aarti. Your journey of 2 decades, a firebrand, bold, strong, devoted and dedicated to the cause of journalism. A great journalism. There are today journalists, you see what's going on. And regularly and immensely appreciated and admired by people. Before I move to that, I want to know about child in you, how you were born, your parents, and your initial journey, especially when we went through a genocide in Kashmir and you had to leave in 1989, 90. So can you tell us about your childhood, quick one?
Thank you, Mr. Bakshi. Let me start with this. I'm a child of conflict. I'm a child who was completely influenced and shaped by the experience of displacement and exile. And I think all the adjectives that you have used for me, all the attributes that you have referred to me, I would say they are an outcome of that experience. Now, getting to my childhood, I come from a very humble Kashmiri Pandit family of Anantnag. My ancestors, of course, have been Kashmiri Pandit for at least 5,000 years, because that is our documented history. And my grandfather also was a very, very humble man who, in fact, one of the earliest journalists of Kashmir at a time when we did not have a printing press. He was one of the founding members of the Martin newspaper, which used to do journalism in Kashmiri language once upon a time in Kashmir. And my father was a public servant. He was a government employee, government educationist in Anantnag. And I grew up in a very modest family with, I would say, very strong values, with a very, very robust understanding of humankind, understanding of humanity. And I think whatever I am a result of that value system. So in Kashmir, though I came from a modest family, I was in many ways also privileged, because I went to army school, Anantnag, at a time when there were very few good schools in the small town of Anantnag. I was also privileged because my father, who is a visionary of sorts, believed in equality of gender. He's always practiced a very progressive outlook towards life. He did not discriminate me and my sister against boys in the family or the extended family. So in a way, you can say that, my personality is an extension of the DNA that I received from my grandfather and my father. So this DNA of leadership probably somewhere comes from my grandfather, who also was part of the Kashmiri Pandit cause for reform. Long ago, when Hindu society across India was going through a progressive movement in the Hindu social and cultural system, my grandfather became a reformist. He was completely in favor of gender equality. He was also in favor of getting rid of rituals and customs that were discriminatory. He was also against dowry. So I grew up in a family where the value system was very, very progressive, liberal, and pluralistic, because my father and my mother were friends with Muslims in Anantnag. In fact, Muslims who were also progressive and liberal, I have to say that, at that point of time, they used to come at our place and they used to, sit with us, and they used to participate in our festivals, in our overall day-to-day life. And similarly, my father would go to his Muslim friends' households and be a member of their family. So I did not grow up with the kind of bigotry that we see today, in not just in Kashmir, we saw in 80, we started seeing it in 80s. But we see it at various places now. We saw very violent riots in Delhi last year. So I would say that, my background, my value system that I got from the family is one of the biggest, the single most factor in shaping my personality. And I really thank my grandparents, I thank my parents for teaching me the right values, for giving me the right education, and giving me also the system or the value system which has been practiced not just by them but by the entire Kashmiri Pandit community for thousands of years. They are not somewhat different, or they're not really unique within Kashmiri Pandit community. If you really look at the community overall, they are by and large a very progressive, liberal, outgoing, and forward-looking people. And my family is no different. They are not very unique from the rest of the community. So I can very confidently say that I'm a product of my value system, of the family and the community at large.
Very amazing. What a great background. And Aarti, you talk about child of conflict, and then you are dealing and handling all these conflicts every time. And I still remember when I was a child, Akhbar-e Martyrs was a very, very famous newspaper at that point of time. My salutes to your grandfather and parents, and bringing in such a great, child and taking it forward. Yes, as a Kashmiri, particularly proud of knowing you. Aarti, my second question to you is, when you then moved to the journey, who mentored you beyond, when you went to the learning opportunity in your, professional environment, the capabilities, attaining those professional attributes of journalism, and your movement from Jammu, a small town, to US, Columbia University, and doing international relations and affairs. What was that? Who mentored? Was there someone who could really guide you, support you? What did they see in you at that point of time as a child who had come out from a conflict zone and finally getting into the journalism? What was that?
I have to also mention the fact that I grew up in a household where newspapers used to come in huge stacks. And that's because my family, my grandfather actually, since he had the journalism background, at some point of time, my father decided that we had a small family business. He extended it, and he basically got into the business of newspaper distribution for the entire district of Anantnag. So my family was perhaps the biggest distributor for newspapers, magazines, comics, and at a later stage, they also developed the first video library in Anantnag town. So I grew up with newspapers lying around, with magazines lying around, and I grew up with a habit which I think my father inculcated of reading comics and books. So the printed world was a phenomenal experience for me as a child, and as I was growing up. Even after displacement, I think when we had nothing, absolutely nothing, we were almost on the streets, but whatever 1 rupee or 50 paisa that my father gave me as pocket money, even in those dire circumstances, I used to save it for books. So that's one. The other thing about mentorship, I think my first and my second and my third mentor, I would say, is first was, of course, newspapers and books and comics. Those were inculcated by my father. Those habit of reading was inculcated by my father. The second, of course, there was this inspiration that my grandfather was this great man who was self-taught man. He came from a very poor family, but he knew at least 3 or 4 languages, and he had learned them on his own. He knew Urdu, he knew Sanskrit, he knew Hindi, and he could also read English. And that was quite phenomenal. So I would say that, that inspired me too. And third, I think there's a long list of people who came along the way, who mentored me, inspired me in one or the other way for the journey I actually embarked on eventually when I decided to join journalism. And I want to really acknowledge everybody here today, since you are giving me this opportunity to show my gratitude for the influence and for the inspiration each person in my life provided. One of the earliest influences, I think, was it's strange, but when displacement happened, and we were almost on the streets, and there was no newspaper or there was no magazine to read, and we had to essentially borrow it from people who could afford to buy a newspaper. One of the persons was a distant relative, but also a well-known name in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. R.K. Bharti. He was a columnist, he was a writer, and it was quite inspirational that he had a small library, so I used to borrow books from him. He used to live nearby where we lived in Jammu. The second, I think, source of inspiration was Nalini Singh, who used to do a program called Hello Zindagi at that point of time. And I think I accidentally stumbled on that program in somebody's home who had a TV at that point of time. And I was blown away by the fact that there is a woman who is going out there and doing, talking to militants, talking to terrorists, talking to all these people who have turned Kashmir upside down. And she has the courage, she has the guts to go out and find out what is happening. So I think she became a huge source of inspiration. And eventually, I would say that, when I decided that I'm going to be a journalist and I was looking for a mentor, I was lucky, and I would say privileged also, that one of the greatest writers and editors of Kashmiri Pandit community, Mr. O. N. Kaul, who was at that time the editor of the Himalayan Mail. Mr. Kaul initially was, he retired as associate editor at the Economic Times in New Delhi. He moved back to Jammu and Kashmir. He came to Jammu and he was handling one of the largest newspapers at the time in J&K, which was the Kashmir Times, owned by Ved Basim. And I think at some point of time, Mr. Kaul and Mr. Basim had a parting over some issue. And Mr. Kaul took over as editor of the Himalayan Mail, which is a local newspaper. He hired me as an apprentice because I was a student at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, a journalism school in Jammu, which was almost a cowshed in Jammu, because at that point of time, my father could not really afford to send me anywhere else. We had absolutely nothing, we could not afford anything. So I went to this small institute, Bharati Vidya Bhavan, and Mr. Kaul on one of the occasions was the chief guest there at the journalism school. And I had contributed a piece in the journal in that in the school, and also I was presenting, I was doing comparing, and for the release of that journal, for which we had invited Mr. Paul. And I think he was somehow he told me, because I went to him and I asked him for a job because I was just passing out from the journalism school, and I asked him if I could work with him. He was known as one of the most arrogant and one of the toughest editors in the town at the time. He was very short-tempered. He did not really tolerate any mediocrity whatsoever. He did not like mediocre people. So I asked him, and he said, there is a spark in you, and I think it can be polished, and I think you will go very far. He could just, with one look, he told me that there's a spark in you. And I think I trusted him, and I just plunged into it because I thought that here's a man who has such a stature in the entire state, and everybody respects him, and he thinks that I have potential. There must be some amount of truth in that. So that really was the biggest turning point in my life, I think. But before that, I want to mention one incident which really changed my life. After my high school, and since there was central government and several state governments were offering reservation seats for displaced Kashmiri Pandits, and there was quota for Kashmiri Pandit students who would graduate, who would do their high school. I was on merit. I got a seat in Pusa Engineering College. And my father and I came to Delhi from Jammu, and my mother was happy that I was getting into the college, a prestigious institute, and I had the merit to be in the college. So we came to the counter where we were supposed to deposit 800 rupees. My father, just before handing over those 800 rupees, that was the only thing he could afford at that point. But it was just that, as luck would have it, it just was that it was at a prestigious institute. And he asked me, do you want to do engineering? And I told him, no, I don't want to do engineering. So he held my hand, and we left the hall, and he did not ask me why. He was not upset with me at my decision at all. And he believed that I had something else on my mind, and I should be given that chance to fulfill my dream. And I think that, again, I would say, like, that sets my father apart from many other parents of his generation, because he was there. He really believed in me. He had the confidence that I would still be able to carve a niche for myself, even as everybody else was going for engineering at that point of time. So he gave me that opportunity. So I have to be grateful to him too. But I would say that Mr. Paul and, of course, television boom at that time, television news boom, where women were coming into journalism from Delhi, and of course, my grandfather.
Wow, what a fantastic, fascinating journey of Aarti. And she really talked about three main people, R.K. Bharti, Nalini Singh, and Owen Kolsar. All these have been very famous names. And the way she could then get into the journalism. And in the meanwhile, I'm seeing a lot of people have already joined. I can see Dr. S.K. Gupta from Washington, D.C. already there. Oh, John is from Michigan already there. I can see Kevin from Singapore. I can see Honey from Cape Town. And Candice Mama is from Durban already there. I can see Franz Grote from Germany already there. I could see Inderjeet Singh joined from he's from Brisbane, and I can see Ash Rana also from Brisbane. I can see In Narula from Thailand, Ashok Bakshi from London, JP Malhotra, the president of DLF Association from Faridabad. Welcome all. I see Tina Bhatt from Srinagar, Kashmir. We have a very bright future leader. Yes, Tina, you mentioned to me other day that you are a fan of Aarti. I can see Vanita Shetty, the women power of Mumbai. Oh, I can see Carolina from Singapore, and I can see NG joined from Bangkok. I can see Usha Potigar joined from Rayong from Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you're watching one of a very premier programs where I have a very great guest of honor with me, Aarti, and who's sharing her story of excellence as a leader of journalism. Aarti, my next question to you is, when then finally you moved to various positions in Hindustan Times, Times of India, BBC, United Nations. I want to talk about your present role, but the previous ones. Now, how I know you are known, as I introduced you, as a well-known leader of journalism with articulation, abundance, and ardent. What kind of beautiful journey you had quickly in these BBC, United Nations, Times of India, Hindustan Times, and which one was very close to your heart where you picked up a lot of good stuff? Quick and fast response, please.
I'm afraid it's not going to be quick because you're talking about my entire career, but I'll try to wrap it up quickly. I have to mention one incident. I think that was the foundation of my type of journalism, which eventually, gave me my USP. When you keep repeating that, firebrand and fearless and bold and courageous journalism, I have to say that it comes really from the very first assignment that I got from Mr. O and Paul. I was an apprentice. I was not a full-time journalist. I was an apprentice, and he was the editor. And he had a very unique way of teaching journalism. My first assignment was, he told me that there's a Comptroller Auditor General's report, which shows that there is misappropriation of funds in Jammu and Kashmir. For your audience abroad, in simpler words, he basically told me that there's a governmental report, accounts report, which shows that there is massive corruption in Jammu and Kashmir. Go and interview the so-and-so authority against whom there are accusations of corruption. So I did not know what it meant. I had absolutely zero idea what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to approach that person, and how I was supposed to dig out information, how I was supposed to even interview, because I was, in fact, very, very young at that point of time. I had, soon after my college, I did my 1-year post-graduation in journalism, and instantly I started working as an apprentice while I was studying simultaneously. I was doing my master's simultaneously. So with so much going on, I was not really prepared, but this was my first assignment. So I figured out, I looked at the yellow pages of Jammu and Kashmir. I found out the phone number of so-and-so person, and I called for an appointment. After several days, I got the appointment with this very powerful bureaucrat against whom there were accusations of corruption. So I went to interview him. I was lucky. One of my relatives had sent me a very small tape recorder with a small cassette. During those times, nowadays you have smartphones. We did not have smartphones at that point of time. But I had this small tape recorder which was hidden in my bag with the tape recorder. I went to interview him, and as a straight shooter, because I did not know how to be diplomatic, how to be how to really, not offend that person. So I started quoting the data from the report I had got from Mr. Paul. And I said, there are reports and there are allegations that your department has misappropriated so many funds. And this was like, these were millions of rupees. So he was very offended and he abused me. It was a sexual abuse. It was harassment, and as a young girl who had absolutely no idea what he even meant, I could not even process it at that point of time. But it came as a shock that I had gone only to interview and I was quoting facts, and this person is offended and he's throwing abuses and slurs at me. But I kept repeating the questions with no emotion whatsoever on my face. I was stoic and I kept asking my questions. And he kept abusing me. And at the end of the interview, when I stepped out of the room, I started crying, and I could understand that I have been humiliated, I have been abused, and I started wondering if I was a good fit in this profession. So I went heartbroken and completely disillusioned, disheartened to Mr. Paul's office, and I threw all the papers on his desk. And he asked me what happened. I did not have the courage to even repeat those abuses. So Mr. Paul told me, get a grip on yourself. You decide, take all these papers, go and write the transcript. Just write everything down and show me the transcript tomorrow, provided you first make up your mind whether you want to be in the profession or not. So when I went back home, I started, recalling about the interview. And then I discovered I had the tape recorder, which was on, and I had the entire interview, all the abuses recorded on the tape recorder. And I was able to transcribe the whole interview, and I went back with the transcript next day. And Mr. Paul was shocked to see the entire interview. And he said, do you have any proof? And I said, yes, I have proof. So he said, well, then I'm going to take on this bureaucrat. So he wrote a front page editorial addressed to that bureaucrat. And he ran the entire interview as it is without my name, saying a young female journalist was humiliated and harassed by this bureaucrat. It became a controversy in the entire state. The government had to respond. There was reaction, and everybody was asking, who is this young female journalist? And I think that set the precedent for me that I cannot cry and I cannot be fearful of these challenges in this profession. I have to stand my ground and I have to fight for myself. And I think that was my first learning. That was my last learning. That really shaped the entire, what you call the DNA of leadership in journalism in my life. And I think I have to remain grateful to Mr. Paul for that, because he did not care what society would think. He did not care what the government would think. He did not care for, anything, but he stood by me. And I also told my parents that this is going to happen. It will appear in the newspaper, so be ready for this. So I think it was a blessing in disguise. And since then, I have never looked back. I have been to the toughest field. I have been to the toughest situations, toughest spots in journalism. And there has not been even one moment when I decided that I can't do it. I always thought that I can do it.
A great learning for people who are watching you or who are going to be watching you later. This is a real story of how a firebrand journalist in the early stages of life had to face situations which were tough, difficult, and how to come out of that. I think that's going to be a lot of learning for those people who are watching you now or who are going to be watching you later. In the meanwhile, I see Ravinder Pandita also joined, and Jai Sharda Ravinder Pandita, he has written some, maybe we'll take that later on. Karuna Ahuja, OD professional, HR OD professional also joined. I can see Bharat is already joined from Abu Dhabi. I am taking your name, Bharat. I know you do a lot of great work in that part of the world. I can see Nilja Sadhu already joined from New Jersey. Very great to see you around. A lot of people from different parts of the world are already here. Oh, I can see Joseph from Sri Lanka already with us. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how Aarti has worked. And now I have a quick question to Aarti. When we have tough, difficult situations, that too in journalism, but she has not been afraid of what to say, how to say, and to whom to say, because she has been questioning. My objective here, Aarti, is to understand, how are you different from others? How did you create that brand in you? You just gave an example, one of them. But how did you create a brand in you, Aarti Tikoos Singh, leader of
Yes.
excellence? What was that? That's very important for us to understand.
Well, I have to thank Mr. Paul once again, because early on he told me, these were his words, that be the brand yourself. Don't rely upon small newspapers, big newspapers, or big companies, small companies. You have to be the brand yourself, which means that your name should carry weight, that your reports should have substance, that your writing should have quality. He was one editor who would crumble the stories. In those days we used to write on paper with a pencil or with a pen, and if he did not like the piece, if he did not like the news report, he would throw that story in the bin. So I learned from him. But I think what really made me different from others was the fact that I really toiled as a field journalist. And this, again, I have to be grateful to Mr. Paul, because he told me that people who sit in a newsroom, who sit on the desk, who join as editors, they really never become great journalists. And therefore, you have to experience the field. You have to go out. You have to find out how life functions. So that's why I was saying that he had a very unique way of teaching journalism. He would just throw information at you, and you had to process it from point A to point Z all by yourself. He did not tell you anything else. All he would do would, he will give you a lead, and then you would have to, really think about the background, the consequences. You would have to think who all can be interviewed. So it was a self-learning exercise. And that's that's really what makes you different, and also in a way fearless, because you are thinking on your own analytically. The second thing I think why I became different and why I am different is my background, for sure. I came from a modest Kashmiri Pandit family. We got displaced in 1990, and I think it really shaped my character in ways that people cannot understand. Simply because I was curious to know, to understand the truth that we had experienced. I was interested in finding out why we were driven out of Kashmir. And that question bothered me. It bothered me because I could not understand why was our identity, Kashmiri Hindu identity, a cause for so much hatred and violence in Kashmir. I wanted to understand why Kashmiri Muslim radicals were against our existence. I also wanted to understand the politics behind it. So it really shaped my thinking, and I started learning history. And I think it's really important for every journalist to have a solid understanding of course, your own history, but also the history around you, the history of the world. So I was driven because I was interested in reading. That's why I said, even when we had absolutely nothing to eat, for years I think we had the same breakfast every single day. We used to get that one chapati and one sabzi, and that was it. We could not even ask for another morsel, and that went on for years. And it did sow the seed in my mind that I needed to know who we are, that why was our identity such a problem to so many people, that why did I witness violence when I should have been playing with my toys. So the fact that my childhood was snatched away from me in 1990 when we were displaced, when we were driven out of our homes. One day we were in the cozy comfort of our homes in Kashmir, and the next day we were on the streets. So it would be logical for anybody to question your existence, to question your politics, to question your history, and to question everything around you. I was lucky that lot of factors, lot of forces came together in my case, because I had the background of my grandfather. I had the vision of my father, who himself was an artist in Kashmir, who was part of the progressive movement in Kashmir with the artists of Kashmir. So I had all that background, and I also had the privilege to be a student in army school in Anantnag. So many things sort of, came together, and it created the person that I am. But also the fact that while we got displaced, many Kashmiri Pandit students were troubled by the circumstances. I went with the kids, who also lived in refugee camps, who also had the same circumstances as me, but they took a different path, they took a different journey. And as I, always believe, to each to his own. But in my case, I think I was influenced also by the geopolitics. I remember very vividly in 8th class, we were now in Jammu. I used to usually hang out with boys of my class. And I remember this discussion among 8th class students, the disintegration of USSR. We were discussing why USSR disintegrated. And although if there was an adult who was overhearing that conversation, he would have laughed. I don't think we knew anything about it, or we understood anything about it. But somehow I felt that it could be connected perhaps to Kashmir. It could be perhaps connected to our surroundings, because we are in Asia. So I think, all these incidents that happened in my childhood somehow influenced me. And I think there is genetics, there is DNA, there is environment. We are a product of both nurture and nature. So I think nurture and nature came together in my case.
Amazing story you are sharing. And Harun in Kabul is saying, yes, I can imagine what must be going on, because Harun in Afghanistan, they have also been victims of militancy. And Aarti, I want to quickly come to a couple of more questions. Let me dig deeper now. I could see you on 23rd October 2019 at the US Congressional Conclave. We could hear you saying boldly and strongly that US Congress hearing was prejudiced and biased against India and in favor of Pakistan. This kind of journalism is unknown, unheard, unbelievable. Again, kindly throw some light on this particular statement when you were there on 23rd of October 2019 at this conclave. What made you to say that this was prejudiced and biased against India in favor of Pakistan?
Till 2019 October, I think I was still very idealistic as a journalist. But I think that congressional hearing in the US really opened my eyes in ways nothing else has. When I became a journalist and when I had my foundations in journalism quite, built now and they were quite solid, I then moved on from Mr. Paul to then Hindustan Times, and from Hindustan Times to Times of India. And in between, I was also working for Doordarshan. I've done lots of things because I had no option but to survive and but to thrive in the profession. So while I was doing that, I was constantly bothered by one thing, that there was a story that I was reading in the newspapers about Kashmir. There was a story that I was seeing on television on Kashmir. But when I became a journalist and I went to the field, and as my foundations were very strong, I was taught not to mix up my personal with my profession, not to mix up my identity with reporting. So I kept these two compartments completely segregated. I would really, I remember when I first went to Kashmir after 12 years of gap. I had left Kashmir as a child. I went back as an adult, and that too only as a professional, not as a returnee, not as a Kashmiri Pandit, because my training was such by Mr. Kaul that I had completely forgotten that I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, I'm a Kashmiri. All I remembered was that I'm a journalist, and all I need to know is I need to collect facts, I need to report facts, and I don't need to mix my feelings with my reportage. My entire reportage of those years is a testimony that I have never been, tilted towards one or the other side. I just reported facts. But what I saw on Indian national media, in newspapers and on TV channels, it did not even synchronize with the experiences or the reportage that I was doing from Kashmir. And I kept wondering that how is it that I look at a story from one angle and the rest of the media is looking at the same story from a different angle? Let me explain this. One example. I went to Kashmir, and a lot of people whom I made friends with in Kashmir media told me to do a story on the human rights violations committed by the Indian state in Kashmir. And I was agreeable because as a journalist, as a reporter, if somebody is telling you that there have been rights violations, you as a professional would actually go and follow that story. So I went to a Martyrs Graveyard, what they call in Kashmir, where they have buried all the martyrs of Kashmir. Now, to me, to somebody from outside, what is this Martyrs Graveyard? What does it really mean? For me, it was an exercise in learning, and I wanted to, before writing anything, I wanted to first understand myself. And I think this is one principle most journalists today do not follow, that before you do something, before you write something, you have to understand a story yourself. Just because somebody is telling you something does not mean that that's the real story. So I wanted to understand what is a martyr, what is a Martyrs Graveyard, and who were these people buried in that Martyrs Graveyard. So I went and I saw, I took a local boy along with me, and I asked him to read read the inscriptions on each grave. The first grave that he pointed out was of Mirwais Farooq, and who was killed by terrorists, who was killed by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists in Kashmir. And I was like, yeah, I mean, he's a Kashmiri Muslim. He's been killed by terrorists. Yeah, he deserves to be in that Martyrs Graveyard because, you know, a Kashmiri was killed by an outsider or backed by an outsider. But couple of graves away from his grave was the grave of his murderer. And that when he, when he told me that he is so and so, and I told him who was he, so I tried to find out who really that person was in that grave, and I realized that both the murderer and the murdered person are in the same graveyard, and both are called martyrs. And it triggered a lot of questioning in my mind that can we even envisage this, that Mahatma Gandhi on one side and Nathuram Godse on the other side in the same cremation ground or same bhavan or wherever their remains are preserved. We cannot even envision that. We cannot even conceive that. We cannot even perceive that, because that is not how you look at what is wrong and what is right. So for me, the question in Kashmir became what is right and what is wrong. It became a question of the moral code. It became a question of the constitutional code. What does India's constitution say? What do our laws say? What do our ethics say? What do our morals say? And I think that's what made me different. That's what brought a different journalism. Therefore, when I went to the US congressional hearing, by that time, I had arrived at this conclusion that the biggest tyrant, biggest oppressor, biggest evil in Kashmir has been Pakistan-sponsored Islamic Jihad. And of course, people who support that. So I had absolutely no doubt. I was completely clear in my witness. As a witness, I went there as a witness, and I was absolutely clear that it's the Pakistan army and it's their sponsored terrorism, it's their sponsored Islamist Jihad that has not only persecuted Kashmiri Hindus, but also persecuted Kashmiri Muslims. But that hearing was a complete setup, because we saw that the hearing was completely lopsided. It was one-sided. It was Aarti Tikoos versus the rest of the panelists in that witness category. I was the only person who had been to Kashmir as a witness after August 5th, 2019, when the government of India reorganized Jammu and Kashmir state, nullified Article 370, which used to grant special status to J&K within the Indian Constitution. And everybody else on that panel had absolutely nothing to do with the fact-finding of Kashmir post August 5th. Nobody had witnessed Kashmir except me, and yet I was the only person whom the Congress, US Congress denied space, denied voice, denied time. And also I was cornered by Ilhan Omar, a well-known Islamist in the US, who is, I mean, a radical Islamist. And yet she was given an opportunity to read out a script in that US congressional hearing, and her script was targeted at me, nobody else. It was targeted at me. Pramila Jayapal, a congresswoman, she targeted me and nobody else. She was praising the Pakistan-backed panelists that day. So therefore, I realized it was a moment of epiphany. It was a moment, I would say, not just epiphany, but an eye-opener in my life, that I had finally understood the entire gamut of global politics. It is not just Pakistan-sponsored Islamic Jihad. It is also their allies in the US. It's also the US who backed Pakistan army, even to raise Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. It was the US, it was the CIA which had backed Taliban to overthrow Soviet Union in Afghanistan. It was Pakistan which had given arms and ammunition to Ziaul Haq, who diverted and who freely gave those arms and ammunition to Islamic jihadists for Kashmir to overthrow Indian state in Kashmir. So that day, it became crystal clear. It was absolutely, that US congressional hearing was like as if it had lifted the complete veil over the global politics in front of my eyes. And that day, I think I understood that my long journey had come to this point. Whatever I had experienced in Kashmir as a journalist, whatever I had experienced as a child, as a Kashmiri Hindu child, whatever I had experienced as a displaced Kashmiri Pandit, all those experiences and the politics of the world became crystal clear. And I understood that it is not just Kashmiri Muslim radicals. It's not only Pakistan, it's America. It is the CIA. It is the Democrats who cornered me that day, who thought that I was the perfect sacrificial lamb and the perfect sacrificial goat, because she's an idiot, she's a naive, idealistic journalist who has a tremendous amount of honesty and integrity, and she needs to be shown her place because her integrity needs to be broken. But it did not break. It became even more stronger. Since that day, I feel even more courageous. I feel freer to say things which I could not have said until that moment in life. I feel somebody did a huge, I would say, a blessing and gave me a huge opportunity to discover my self in a way. It was a self-realization that day.
I feel proud of it, and this is a fact of life that the entire world, in fact, US has been attacking and supporting and being against India. And there are many giants in our own country who make us to suffer, and especially into the journalism also. We need not to take names here, but this is a fact of life that our own country journalism has not been that pure and that normal, and there are a lot of ethical issues on that. And the way you could come out and talk about that at this Congress was fascinating. And that talks about your 3 Gs of guts, galore, and grace. And I feel, Aarti, very proud of you. This comes to, ladies and gentlemen, this comes to her because she has had boots on her ground. She has been always to the field. When you have boots on the ground, you know what's going on in the field. Your confidence, courage, conviction. I get 3 Cs. Confidence, courage, and conviction becomes very powerful. Now we are racing with the time now. We are going through a very wonderful story of a great journalist, but at the same time, we need to now look and move forward. Now, Aarti, I'm coming to the COVID days. February 2020, tough, difficult. India is going to be destroyed. That's what the Western world thought about. But then the way the things went in 2020, India could come out of that bad situation, controlled it so beautifully. And then the vaccination program, and then healing the world, and then moving forward. We all felt proud of India as a country because everybody thought that this is what India is. Indian talent is, India pharma industry is, India, scientists are, and everything was going smooth. Suddenly, last couple of weeks. When we started, and we started with the same situation. Very tough situation came to us. And we are right now at the peak of the wave where we are losing our close relatives, our close friends. My mommy left, my mama is still struggling, my cousin brother left, another cousin brother is struggling, my Masi ki ladki is struggling. There are a lot of people already struggling around my own family members. I'm trying to support people from right and left through gas cylinders, oxygen concentrators from outside the country, trying to do something for the community as a whole and trying to work out. So we are in mess right now. I feel proud to be an Indian. So there are two flags, India and Thailand. Thailand is my Karma Bhumi, India is my Janma Bhumi, and I feel proud to be a great Indian, a global Indian. Right now I feel painful like you. What's going on in our own country? While the first phase we appreciate, how do we get out of this mess? What went wrong? And as a journalist, you have every right to talk about it, because I am in favor of talking the truth. And I don't, even yesterday I put a tweet and it's trending already on tweet. And this you can see, it's trending because we arrange, gas, oxygen cylinders from Bangkok, Thailand to this country. And you could see some of the chief minister talking about. And yeah, so what is your view on this now? How do we overcome? What went wrong?
First of all, my condolences to every relative, every person who has lost a near and dear one amidst this coronavirus pandemic. Really, it's a tough time, and every day it's really anxious. We are getting anxious, and it's distressing for everybody. Now, what went wrong in the second phase? Let me first point out a few things. A few years ago, I mean, let's say, because we're not going to talk about this government, I want to go back to how situation was till 2014, because most people right now seem to think that whatever problems that we are facing because of the lack of healthcare infrastructure, they are only the doing of this government or the doing of the governments whosoever is running in the country right now. You know, whether it's Kejriwal, whether it's Yogi, whether it's somebody else in the country, Shiv Sena in Maharashtra, one has to first acknowledge facts. The fact is that Indian state before 2014 paid very little attention to healthcare infrastructure. If you really go around, if you really went around in India and looked for healthcare in a small town and small village, you would be aghast, because despite the fact that, you know, we made progress, we made tremendous progress from 1990 onwards, after economic liberalization, after India saw very high rates of economic growth, we did not really pay attention to healthcare. There is very little we can be really proud of in terms of healthcare infrastructure, except for the super specialty hospitals in the 4 biggest cosmopolitan cities of the country. We cannot really say with pride that we have had a great infrastructure. Now, from 2014 onwards, since everybody seems to be making this about the Modi government is a disaster, everybody is saying that they have failed, it's a fascistic government, they are killing people, as if coronavirus pandemic was manufactured by Prime Minister Modi in his backyard. So it is completely illogical, absurd, and unethical to create such a narrative. Because if you're a journalist, you better have your homework done. You need to find out first what kind of infrastructure we had before the coronavirus pandemic. I don't think we had the A-class infrastructure, which most of the developed countries, or in fact all the developed countries, have. We cannot even compare ourselves with the US or Europe or UK in terms of healthcare. Second, Uh, After coronavirus pandemic, if you really look at India's efforts in terms of vaccine production, in terms of creating awareness across the country, in terms of also providing food grains to poor people through the lockdown last year, the kind of efforts that not just, I am not saying that only the central government made those efforts, even the state governments made those efforts last year. But this year, there was complacency. Now, it's possible there are political angles to it. It's possible that there is political manipulation. It's possible that the opposition, which has been going after the central government, after the Modi government, issue after issue, we have seen every year there is some kind of issue which is blown out of proportion, which becomes headlines in international newspapers. This year, it seems that it is going to be supposedly so-called fascistic government of Prime Minister Modi, which created this disaster. But the fact is, the second wave actually started from Maharashtra, which is not really run by Prime Minister Modi. The figures that you see in Chhattisgarh, in Punjab, none of these states, or in Delhi for that matter, none of these states are controlled or governed by Prime Minister Modi. So it's absurd to say that, the central government is responsible. I think if you really want to pin responsibility, then it's a collective responsibility, collective failure. As much as it was a collective success last year of both center and states, it is a collective failure of states and the center this year, because somewhere we did not take care of the precautions that we were supposed to take. We lowered our guard. Huge rallies were conducted, which would have been still okay, but people were not wearing masks. And it's also intriguing. I covered elections recently. I went to Assam. I attended rallies, which had like thousands of people. Thousands and thousands of people attended those rallies. People were not wearing masks. So there was a certain sense that India is all right, because nobody was getting sick. Assam, if you look at Assam's data, Assam is pretty. It's not bad. So despite those rallies, despite the electioneering, despite everything going on, businesses going on, things seemed okay. But somewhere, states which were registering massive spread of the coronavirus pandemic did not take enough precautions, did not act swiftly. We also somewhere got, in a way, betrayed, I would say, at an international level. Now, people may not like this, but many people look at the biggest superpowers like the US and China with kindness and have great views about them. But this coronavirus pandemic has actually exposed their imperialistic behavior. It has also exposed their ruthlessness. It has also exposed their callousness, and also exposed how insensitive and inhuman they can be while the rest of humanity is struggling and suffering. I'm saying this because for weeks, the Biden administration did not respond to the requests made by the government of India on waiving of the intellectual rights on vaccine materials, raw materials. China similarly suspended their services, cargo services, air cargo services, which was bringing vaccine raw material. So if the two biggest superpowers of the world are behaving in such inhuman ways, and letting India suffer, that should tell us why India actually is a better, we're not a superpower, but we are a power. We are a more humanitarian power than both the US and China. We are far more sensitive than all these superpowers, the 5 superpowers in the world, because we were distributing vaccines, we were distributing medicines, we were distributing PPE kits, we were giving away COVID related materials to the rest of the world when they needed it, when the US needed it. We went out of our way to help China. We went out of our way to help every country in Europe last year when they were suffering due to this crisis. And yet, in this crisis, we noticed that the World Trade Organization, where all these big powers come together, in fact, Europe, Australia, US, everybody ganged up denying the request made by India and other developing countries, which is around 100 countries, asking them to waive off the patent, waive off the intellectual rights on vaccine materials. So what we are really seeing is that in this crisis, it should be absolutely clear to the world that neither the US nor China are the true moral inheritors of being called superpowers.
You have actually shown the real light, all of us, what is going on globally against India and how it's going to be tougher because they believe that India is going to be the superpower. And of course, there are a lot of comments coming in. I salute you, Aarti Tikoos. God bless you abundantly and exceedingly always as our. You are real proud for us, India. And another lady, Tina, saying, very wonderful. Indians exhibited more humanist values. Somebody said, you are an epitome of female leadership. What a courageous lady with understanding of right and wrong. Cheers for Aarti, JP Malhotra. Absolutely amazing and fearless lady we have with DK Bakshi today. DK Bakshi and Aarti, very happy to won this talk. And Africa guys, Sanjay Srivas from Nigeria, happy to learn today the great legends. Wonderful. Aarti, I have no last question. I need to go on because we have some questions coming from people. I could take more questions. I don't want to leave you. Frankly speaking, this interaction is becoming so powerful and so wonderful because this is a learning for me. Because I am not a journalist. I am not an interviewer. I have just learned in the process. I am not a man on this machine. I am a man into action, face to face. I hope I keep on writing on my status because I am into action, into the five-star hotels, into the training rooms, into the seminars. I need 500 people to do 1,000 people do a motivational, 2-hour session called Romance with Destiny. One dream, one team, leadership programs on a beach, on a hill. I am into action. Unfortunately, the last now 14 months, I am on this. But I always keep on asking people, when do I get out of this visas and this, stuff which is fast food. I want to go to fine dining. I'm a fine dining man. My last question, I don't know whether you know about it. I have been running last 14 months and another intervention. This is a Wednesday one. Another intervention is Saturday, every Saturday, which calls about hashtag Women Power Global Movement. 1 million women, irrespective of caste, creed, color, nationality, and religion on this platform by 2024. And Kiran Ma'am, who is my mentor, we do a lot of leadership programs together in India and globally. And she's number one women power for us. And this is what we are doing every Saturday. And we have 20 chapters around the world. I have a huge women power ladies around it. In fact, I got call from Ericsson, our Sanjay Cole, the president of Asia Pacific, and he said, we want to collaborate with this women power from Asia University of Women, and Tony Blair is going to be there, so why don't you join? So we are going to have that soon. There's going to be a big event around the world where we will target to get 1 million women to be touched. Now, this program of ours is very powerful. And there are some power women already watching me. I am known in this process as a madman. I am mad about it. I don't know. I am mad. Because women have
Only mad change the world. Mr. Bakshi, only mad people change the world. I am one among them.
So, how do you see this going forward, and how can I expect your support in this moment? I have many journalists. Shazia Almi is one of our women power ladies. She was on my show on a women power. Many IPS, IAS officers, ambassadors, a lot of people, many singers. In fact, this another singer is going to be there in next month. She is a Bhojpuri singer, well known. She is also agreed to be there. So I had Shazia Almi, I had the Bilaz Masani, I had many people.
Malini, are you talking of Malini Avasthi?
Malini Avasthi is going to be on my show in the month of May, I suppose. And she's going to be on the show. So my question to you is, as a women power, you're also women power. You come on this leadership show, but you're a women power. How do you see this movement going forward? Because you see, I do programs in Afghanistan, I do programs in Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Nigeria, tough countries. And you know the condition of women here. That's why a lot of Afghani women very closely associated with. How do you see this movement going forward? And how you as a journalist can support our movement?
Well, I have to say that I'm a very optimistic person as far as women empowerment goes, because I feel that the freedoms that I enjoyed because of my visionary, open-minded parents, because of the kind of education that I received from my grandparents, not just about our community, about our culture and heritage and civilization, but also about who we are. I mean, really think about it. Indian people, civilizationally, at least Kashmiri Hindus especially, I would say, civilizationally, we have believed in a parity of gender. We are people who worship Shiva and Shakti at par. We believe that without Shakti there is no Shiva, and without Shiva there is no Shakti. So we believe in that core philosophy. That's what I learned from my grandfather. That's what I learned from my parents, and that's what I'm teaching to my young nephews and nieces. And I'm sure that they are going to carry this forward. Essentially, what I'm saying is that the culture, the Indic culture, the Indian culture, the civilizational culture, it has an inbuilt role model for women empowerment. We don't really need to, do anything except go back to who we are. And we have lived, I mean, even today, if you see my mother always called me Kali. She never said, she never said Shiva or Krishna or any, she always said Kali. So we believe that, a woman has tremendous power. She just needs to channelize it. And also our Indian constitution has granted us that status. We are not, unlike Pakistan, unlike Afghanistan, unlike Islamic countries. Our constitution has gender parity. It has all the value system of the Indic system and Indic civilization. But in the rest of the world, for example, since you asked me about Nigeria and Afghanistan and other countries, I think if you really look at what the Muslim world trends are, the Muslim world trends are hugely shaped and influenced by two centers of culture and so two centers of religion, actually. Islam is one religion, but it has two power centers. One is Saudi Arabia and the other is Iran. Iran has huge hopes because there is a is a revolution going on within the women of Iran who are coming out time and again. They have come out and they have defied the theocratic thinking and theocratic what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, they are defying Islamic theocracy, which denies women its rights, which denies women her rights. And in Saudi Arabia, if you really look at some of the improvements or some of the developments that have happened in the last couple of years under Mohammed bin Salman, we see that there is some kind of reformation happening there as well. It's going to take a little time for these two power centers to really reform themselves. But once they are reformed, I think we will see gradual incremental changes in other parts, in other Muslim countries as well. As far as India is concerned, I think India has already a fundamental preamble, fundamental constitution, which makes it amply clear that we will empower women, we will remove the injustices meted out to women. For example, there was triple talaq, a grave injustice to Muslim women that is out of the system now. It's not relevant anymore. It's finished. Then, of course, we had grave injustices meted out to the women of Jammu and Kashmir because of permanent residency laws which were discriminatory against women of J&K. Those are also gone because this government decided that they are going to bring in gender parity. So for Muslim women also, I think in India, we will see as time follows, we will see that uniform civil code sooner or later will come, and they will remove lot of discrepancies, lot of discrimination that is still going on against women because there aren't enough substantial laws to protect them. So I am not pessimistic about India. About the Muslim world, as I said, the power centers, Saudi Arabia and Iran, will lead the reformist movement, and that's what will spread in the rest of the Muslim world. India is not a Muslim country. India is not an Islamic republic. India is a secular republic where the constitution will be fundamentally the final word on gender parity and women empowerment. And I think Indian women overall are doing great. We are seeing women in parliament. We are seeing women in politics. We are seeing women in journalism. We are seeing women in defense services. We are seeing women in every field whatsoever we have. There is no field as of today which women cannot enter. So I remain very optimistic. I think India is living its philosophy of Shiva and Shakti at par with each other.
Aarti, we have 1.5 hours gone already. There are a lot of questions, but I am taking only those ones who are here. Vanita Sethi, I unmute you. You can go ahead with your question. I can't take other questions. There are a lot of questions I can take later. Vanita Sethi, please go ahead and ask your question. I can unmute you. I have unmuted you. Vanita, you need to unmute yourself. Please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can. Please ask.
Yeah, I'm very proud of Aarti Tikoos. She has done so many things in her life, It's really very, very great of her. I salute her.
Thank you.
Any
Humble.
questions? Do you have any questions, Vanita? You raise your hand.
Yeah, I would like to ask her, I always ask every person, I'm 59-year-old. Can I start a new beginning of my life? I've been doing prison ministry, but I want to do something more and more.
Absolutely, Vinita ji. I would say that you have another lifetime, actually. You have another lifetime because your life now, starts a new phase. In fact, long ago, somebody told me, he said it was, and it has stayed with me. I have actually practiced this. I practice this every day. He told me, and he is in a way huge influence in my life. I have to give him credit. Um, I'm referring to Tariq Fatah, who is a great scholar of Islam and also a great orator. And he told me once, he said, Aarti, career jo hota hai, a job starts from 9 to 5, but real career begins before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. So you must fulfill your passions before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. And I have practiced that, because 9 to 5 is your livelihood, you're earning that. But everything else, because we humans are so complex, we have so much talent, we have so much potential, which we do not even realize, but we can realize it if we first accept that every day is a gift, that every moment in this life is precious, and we live to enjoy all these complex experiences. So I think you must fulfill all your passions, things you did not do as a child but wanted to do, things you did not could not do while you were growing up as an adult. Things, I mean, for example, I have decided that when I retire, I'm going to learn classical singing. So,
Wow.
so that's one thing I want to do, after 59, 60. And I'm determined that I will do it. There are many things that I could not do as a child when we got displaced, when we had no means, absolutely nothing except, basically the bare minimum. So a lot of things I missed in my childhood. I could not enjoy a normal childhood. But now I do that, before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. I do that. I do many things. Like, for example, I wanted to swim when I was a child, but I couldn't. I learned swimming as an adult. And I do, whenever I get a chance, I swim in the morning. There are things that, for example, I love painting and drawing. I do it in the late evenings. So there are many things which you can do, and whatever gives you satisfaction.
Yes,
No
yes.
doubt
You're my
about it.
real role model. Thank you, Aarti Tikoos.
Thanks very
Thank you,
much
Aarti.
for joining me. And you see, there are many things one can do. I am only 61-year-old young man. I'm one of the
Yes.
Very true, very true.
and 25 years ago, but Corona, COVID should leave me. But I'm fighting.
Yes, that's
Against
the
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
So I got another question, and which is coming from Michigan, and the question is, what should be the prime quality and responsibility of a great leader and journalist? How it can be analyzed?
I think leadership fundamentally means to take the initiative, and a person who is fearless will take an initiative. People who are afraid, people who fear society, people who fear what people will say, people who fear people who fear failure will hesitate to take an initiative. So failure should not be the stumbling block. The thought that people will ridicule you, the thought that people will mock you, the thought that you will be embarrassed, you will be insulted, you will be humiliated. All these fears are something a leader cannot afford to have. Therefore, I would say fearlessness and the drive to lead. I think those are really important to be a leader. You cannot be a leader without being fearless.
Beautiful.
Being a good journalist, I think, also requires a few additional things. And I would say integrity is very important. Moral compass is very important. Without morality, without a moral compass, without knowing what is right and what is wrong, you cannot be a good journalist. Absolutely not. I don't think you can be you may have all the drive to go around and do stories, even in graveyards and even in cremation grounds. But if you do not know what is right and wrong, if you do not know what is truth and falsehood, then you are not a great journalist. You cannot be a great journalist.
Wonderful. I am a leadership coach and I have learned a couple of more tips on the leadership today. Thanks to Aarti. And Tina, you wanted a question. I am unmuting you fast. Quick one because we need to close it. Tina,
Good
you can
evening.
go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I
Thank
audible?
you. Yes,
go ahead.
Tina.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Good.
Ma'am,
How are you?
really, it's an honor to have you as a glorious figure in our community, really. And I have been following you on Facebook as well, but today I really thank Mr. Bakshi for giving us an opportunity to hear such an inspirational story of yours. Just a quick question I have. What, according to you, is the role of community and culture that plays, according to you, that has actually helped you to see yourself as a woman and a leader? Role of your own community and culture.
Tina, some bits.
First of all, Tina, I should call you Dr. Tina because you have now doctor.
Sir, I'll always remain Tina for you.
Okay, Dr. Tina. I think some bits of it I already covered, and I did acknowledge it that I am shaped by the cultural values of our community. I'm shaped by the overall outlook of the community. I mentioned that, my parents, for example, have been a huge influence in my life. My grandparents have shaped my personality, but they are not unique. They are like every other Kashmiri Pandit. They have the same DNA, they have the same cultural values, they have the same vision of being of looking at the world at large. They do not think in terms of they do not have parochial thinking, they do not think in narrow terms. So that is what really shaped me. And also the fact, a lot of people say in the rest of India, outside Kashmir, also in Jammu, I saw that women are not treated at par. But when people ask me that, why are you so different? And I tell them because most of the community is actually very progressive and very open-minded, and women get the same respect, women get the same freedom. Maybe not, the same, maybe not as much freedom as I enjoyed, because I think I enjoyed way more freedom than many girls of my generation. But I know that women get same respect and get same huge amount of space within the Kashmiri Pandit community. It's a community that is really enlightened in many ways. Okay, let me narrate this last story on this program. My mother, when I was born, was very disheartened. I think she wanted a boy, and she wanted a boy. And I have asked her, and I have asked her several times. In fact, I now jokingly taunt her, and she wanted a son, and I have asked her, why did she want a son? And she said, because at the time, society was like that. Women did not have the same amount of freedoms, and women did not have the same status, and other things. And there was a certain demand for boys. So for them, there was a certain preference for the male gender. And my mother, came from a very good family. It was not as if, anybody would have done anything to her or have said anything to her. Yet she was very disheartened. She was crying when I was born. But my grandfather, whom I mentioned as a reformist, and who was one of the founding members of the Martyr newspaper in Kashmir. He went to my mother and he took me in his lap and said, told my mother that I was his daughter rather than my mother's daughter. And from that day, my grandfather, most of my childhood memory is about my grandfather because I was his daughter and not my mother's daughter, because my grandfather was upset that my mother had cried when I was born. So that tells you that, that gender parity, the status of woman in Kashmiri Pandit community was already at a very high level than the rest of the society in the rest of India in my grandfather's time. So from my grandfather's time to my time, I think we have made more progress, we have moved more forward, and we have now great women voices. We have women in every field who are masters, in their own right. And I have to say that the community will always sing Laldet more than anybody else. So Laleshwari is one of our biggest cultural icons.
Yes.
She's our biggest spiritual icons. What more do we need as a proof to say that, Kashmiri Hindu community is actually a community where Shakti is far more important. She is far more valued than anything else.
Beautiful, ma'am. Beautiful. Thank you so much for such a beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Tina. And I have got last question now, Anshul, because I did not know, because you have some other number today. Anshul, your last question, because I need to close. Anshul,
take much of it. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Director of Business School in Navi, Mumbai, and she is Female Power Chapter Head for Mumbai. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Aarti, it's brilliant and fearless discussion that we are, listening from past almost 1.5 hours. And abhi bhi man nahi kar raha hai ki isko khatam kare, but yes, we have to put an end to things. So, Aarti,
very well said, ma'am. Well said. Same here. Similar thoughts here.
Yeah. So, Aarti, my question to you is: see, being journalist, you have worked with different, organizations like Times of India, Hindustan Times, and many more. So every organization has got different school of thought. So how a journalist has to align himself or herself to attune with that organization, because ultimately you are the face of what we are of the community or of the country at large. Because whatever you guys are doing, that we are seeing. So somewhere you are the eyes of us, the community. So what is the responsibility of journalists that way, and how you can keep your integrity being working with different organizations? So please just throw some light on this.
It's a very critical question, and it requires a lot of time, because there are a lot of things that I can reveal, but it will need a different session altogether. But briefly, I'll say that there's a price that you pay for keeping your integrity, and I have paid that price. I haven't revealed yet how I paid that price, but someday, for sure, I will reveal how I paid price for being who I am, for keeping my integrity, for keeping my honesty. But I will tell you that there were instances, for example, a former chief minister offered me bribe in front of 2 people. There were people in Kashmir, for example, who offered me bribe, who sent messages, who sent emissaries, and said that I could be part of the elite class in Kashmir if I stopped talking, if I stopped writing, and if I stopped saying things that I do. Such offers were made. In the mainstream media, many times there were issues, or there were stories, or there were things that I wrote which did not get published. And yet there were moments, and there were editors, and there were people within mainstream media who encouraged me to write. So it's a mixed bag. There are people who will try to pull you down. There are people who will back you. I was fortunate. There were people, for example, in Times of India, my former editor who passed away a couple of years ago. He was young, he passed away. He gave me a lot of opportunity to write what I was seeing in Kashmir, despite the fact that I was writing against the tide. I was writing which no other newspaper would write. I was writing what no other journalist in Jammu and Kashmir would write. There were people in Delhi media who created a completely different false narrative on Kashmir. But I was given the opportunity by one editor or some editor to write what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. But there were many moments, there were many occasions when my voice was stifled. There was a price I paid in many organizations because I had certain views, I had a certain voice. But I will tell you one thing, that whenever I was denied an opportunity by anybody in the mainstream media, I used that, I think that occasion, I used that space to reinvent myself. And
Wow.
people will wonder, how did I reinvent myself? When people denied me space, say for example in a newspaper, or did not give me opportunity to write, or did not publish my article, I went to social media. I expressed my opinions in social media. I went to public, I went to audience, because ultimately a good journalist is the one whom people can trust. And you cannot build trust unless you are speaking the truth. People will call you out, people will find out, people will point out your falsehoods. People can see through the fake narrative. So I went to people, I went to readers, I went to my own audience, and therefore I reinvented myself. Whenever people shut the doors on me, I realized that I had another opportunity to do something else. So I would say that though there is a cost, there's a price I have paid for keeping my integrity, I am a happy person. I'm a content person, and I sleep very well. I don't have any insomnia. I don't have issues with my conscience. My conscience is light, and I speak to my audience freely and fearlessly, and I will continue to do so.
That's
Beautiful.
brilliant.
Oh my God, this is first time I'm going to near about 2 hours. I never had a program like this, Aarti. Aarti, what's going on? I need to close. Ladies and gentlemen around the world who are watching us or will be watching us later, what an amazing story of excellence of Aarti Tikoos Singh we had this evening. I cannot take all the questions because of the time now, because we are racing out. And I need to now close it by requesting my director, Global Talent Thailand, Kun in Narula. Achanin is born in Thailand, 4 generations Sikh in Thailand, and is right now the director of Global Talent Thailand. Achanin, I am unmuting you, and
Yes.
Varsha and Amresh, you would like to
Okay.
see him. You can unmute you, or you can unmute and see your video as well. Would like to see you. Bangkok is okay.
Can you hear
Someone-
me now? Can you
We
hear
can
me now,
but we
sir?
can't see you. But we can't see you. You have to-
Okay.
Your video as well. Something wrong.
Is the video on?
No, we can't see you. Amresh, Varsha, can you help? Any problem in the video? In Narula is again a leadership coach, well-known name in the country, in Thailand, keeps coming to India as well. We do a lot of work globally on leadership, one dream, one team, roadmap to success, DNA of leadership, romancing with our destiny. Okay, we can't see you. My pillai nakap, my mi panna nakap, my mi panna nakap, but unmute nakap.
I think by mistake. Yeah.
Okay,
You should be able to see
Savadikap.
me now. Namaskar ji. Namaskar. How are you, sir?
I'm very good.
I'm thinking of the time when we were in Afghanistan. But
Yeah.
before we talk about that, it's a long story. That was a brilliant experience.
Our ministers and MPs, yes.
Yes, and I think what is important is what brings to mind is, we were on the field, just like Aarti Tikoos is on the field in order to find information, and that's what we did. And you need to be courageous in order to do that. But coming back to Aarti Tikoos, it was a beautiful experience, and once is enough.
Sushma ji was in touch with us, Sushma Swaraj, our foreign minister, every day with the local president. We were 7 of us, and it was a tough time to be in Mazar-e-Sharif conducting leadership, transformative leadership to ministers, MPs, member of parliament, directors, all women, 60 of them. And Sushma ji used to call every day, and ambassador was in touch. How do we manage? And then we landed back, all of us in India. And
exactly.
It was something in the flight itself. We are landing at Delhi, are you sure? And then let's first have a cup of coffee. Let's get relieved. My God. So it was 7 days. On the ground.
Once is enough. But we will relate that later on to Aarti Tikoos. For now, let me try to sum up. The discourse this evening is great. Just brilliant. What can I say? What a beautiful discourse. I learned so much. I do not know how to thank Aarti Tikoos. Beautifully done. Anyway, let me try to sum it up. She first expressed her heartfelt condolences to all who are affected by the COVID-19. As sad as it is, the situation is very grim, but also there is hope. Together, we can overcome the situation, but we need to be together and be strong.
Absolutely.
Yes, and your grandfather and your father, and of course, Mr. Gal, set the foundation, the values that runs in your blood, in your genetics, and also in your DNA. What a brilliant way to come across, and that has shaped you to be who you are today. And you gave a lot of examples. Let me try to bring them together and connect it to the leadership skills. Your first assignment to interview the corrupt and the powerful bureaucrats taught you not to give up. With the backing of Mr. Gal, you began a great journey to become an honest journalist with the ability to distinguish between facts and opinion. You learn it from the very early age because, we can mix up these two very easily and quickly. Second, you were taught to be yourself. You were taught to be a brand within yourself. You established the Aarti Tikoos brand of courage, confidence, and conviction, and to embrace the value of guts, valor, and grace. Brilliantly put forward. Love it. Number 3, it is Mr. Cal who taught and gave you the assignment where you develop your analytical skill, and you also develop your characters and attributes, where you learn to be assertive and speak your mind, telling and reporting the truth so that the world may change. Eventually, that's the objective. And to be a better place, to be a more peaceful ground where there is equality and fairness. Number 4, your grandfather and father and your surroundings, including your schooling, have inculcated in you the love to read. And you recommended with your keen interest to read history, not only your immediate history, but the history of the world, because that will enlarge the information, and that with your analytical mind, then you can process and give the world your viewpoint. Number 5, you separate and realize your personal and professional thoughts, personal opinions, and the truth can be very different. Number 6, you do not stand for mediocrity or inefficiency. You stand for professionalism, as you have shown in the way you are talking this evening with tons of examples. And I love that. Those examples, have really taught, and we learn a lot from that. Now, connecting it to the leader, what are some of the values? What are some of the behavior we can bring out from your talk this evening? As a leader, the following values come to mind: equality, fairness, honesty, integrity, gratefulness, assertiveness, be courageous, be confident, be conviction, and be grateful. And I think you ended up somewhere, somehow, everyone is responsible to increase their personal hygiene in order to fight the COVID, and collectively to improve the healthcare infrastructure. We can do it. Let us show the world that we can. Ladies and gentlemen, and Dr. Bakshi in particular, let us please stand up and give, may I call you Dr. Aarti Tikoos, a standing ovation.
Oh my goodness, thank you so
forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really honored and humbled. It's been a great, great privilege to speak to all of you. And I have absolutely no words after hearing what you said. It's just amazing how you minutely observed everything that I said. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And seriously, I look forward to welcoming you in Thailand when the skies open up, or maybe I'll come to India to meet you. It would be a great honor, ma'am.
Thank you.
We would definitely invite her at the India Thai Chamber of Commerce as well as Indian Association of Thailand for an evening talk with the Grace, Glory and Guts, journalists from India. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great leadership series we have, and people like Aarti making a big difference, and her success story, her journey of excellence today was fascinating and fantastic. I would like to thank you and Achan in
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, and each and everybody around the world who joined or who are going to be watching it later. This has been one of a very powerful evening. As I said in the beginning, I was expecting it. I have been an admirer of Aarti, and though we have never met, but I have been following her, and it has been great. Aarti, on behalf of Global Talent and on behalf of this leadership series called New DNA of Leadership, thank you so much for your contribution. And the next half an hour, we'll have the YouTube ready. It will again go on the social media, on all the social media. I was not on social media 14 months back. Now I am everywhere, and that's what the learning is. I am a student of leadership and student of learning. Achani and myself, Kiran Bedi, Padma Shri, Dr. Pritam Singh, we all do programs together. We keep on learning from each other. Even Achani in Narula makes me to learn a lot, and that's how the life goes. So it is,
well, it's a mutual learning.
It has been a great experience, Aarti, to be with you. A lot of things we could pick up from the leadership point of view. And I wish you good luck. And I wish you good health, safety. And I wish everyone in the human race, hey God, peace, prosperity, and good health for all the people around the world, irrespective of caste, creed, color, nationality, and religion. We need now to get back to normal. Hey Bhagwan, hey God, hey Allah, hey Sadhguru, hey Guru Nanak Ji, please get us back. Hey Jesus, please get us back to normal. We have lost so many people. We are losing so many people. And it's a tough moment of our life. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Aarti, for being here.
Thank you.
It has been fantastic. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you. Take care and have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.